Have you ever walked away from a completely normal conversation and then spent the next hour wondering if you said something wrong? Maybe someone replied, "Yeah, that's fine," and your mind immediately started investigating. Why did they say it like that? Were they annoyed? Did I talk too much? Was that joke weird? Should I have explained myself differently? Then, hours later, your brain suddenly remembers one sentence you said and decides to reopen the entire case. If this happens to you often, you might assume that you simply think too much. But psychologically, something more interesting may be happening. Overthinking conversations is often connected to the way your brain handles uncertainty, social evaluation, memory, and emotional threat. And strangely enough, some of the qualities that make you good at understanding people can also make conversations harder to let go of. So in this video, we're going to explore 6 psychological reasons some people replay conversations again and again. And by the end, you may stop asking, "Why can't I just stop thinking?" and start asking a much more useful question. What is my mind trying to protect me from? Number 1, your brain is trying to resolve uncertainty. One of the biggest reasons conversations become mentally sticky is surprisingly simple. They are ambiguous. Human beings generally dislike uncertainty, especially when that uncertainty involves other people. Psychologists sometimes describe this through the concept of intolerance of uncertainty, the tendency to experience uncertain situations as especially uncomfortable or threatening. And conversations contain enormous amounts of uncertainty. Someone pauses before answering. Someone sends a shorter text than usual. Someone says, "Interesting," but you cannot tell whether they mean genuinely interesting or politely disappointing. There is rarely enough information to know exactly what another person is thinking. For many people, that ambiguity disappears quickly, but an overthinking mind keeps trying to solve it. Imagine you tell a coworker about an idea. They look at you for a second and say, "Okay." Then they return to their computer. The conversation lasted 10 seconds. But your brain may spend 30 minutes trying to decode those 10 seconds. Was that a bad reaction? Did I sound stupid? Maybe they disagreed but didn't want to say it. The problem is that thinking cannot always eliminate social uncertainty. Sometimes there simply isn't enough information. So the brain keeps searching for an answer that does not exist. And this creates one of the most important lessons about conversational overthinking. Sometimes your mind isn't searching for truth. It's searching for certainty. Those are not always the same thing. Number 2, you may be overestimating how much people notice you. Suppose you accidentally use the wrong word during a conversation. You notice immediately, and for the next 20 minutes you are painfully aware of it. But the other person, they may have forgotten it almost instantly. Psychologists Thomas Gilovich, Victoria Medvec, and Kenneth Savitsky studied a phenomenon known as the spotlight effect. The basic idea is that people tend to overestimate how much other people notice their appearance and behavior. In one well-known experiment, participants wore an embarrassing t-shirt and estimated how many people in the room had noticed it. They generally expected far more people to notice than actually did. Why? Because you experience yourself from the inside. Your mistakes are extremely visible to you. Other people experience you from the outside while also thinking about themselves. So imagine you're telling a story at dinner and accidentally interrupt someone. Immediately, you think, "That was rude." Later that night, everyone probably noticed, but the person beside you might be thinking about something completely different. Did I talk too much tonight? This is the strange symmetry of social anxiety. You may be worrying about what everyone thinks of you, while they are worrying about what you think of them. The spotlight feels bright because you're standing underneath it, but most people are standing underneath their own. What feels unforgettable to you may have barely registered for someone else. Number 3, you treat conversations like performance reviews. For some people, conversations are simply experiences. For others, they become evaluations. After talking to someone, the mind begins scoring the interaction. Was I interesting enough? Did I seem confident? Did I say too much? Did they like me? Psychological research on social anxiety and self-focused attention helps explain this pattern. When people become highly concerned about how they are being evaluated, attention can shift inward. Instead of simply participating in the conversation, part of the mind begins monitoring the self. You become both the person speaking and the person watching yourself speak. Imagine meeting someone new at a party. They ask what you do. You answer. But while you're answering, another mental voice is already commenting. You're explaining too much. Why are your hands moving like that? They look bored. Now you're not fully having a conversation anymore. You're managing a performance. And afterward, the performance gets reviewed. Every awkward pause becomes evidence. Every imperfect sentence gets examined. Every facial expression becomes data. The irony is that excessive self-monitoring can make social situations feel less natural, which then gives you even more material to analyze afterward. The goal is not to stop caring how you affect people. Healthy self-awareness matters. But self-awareness and constant self-surveillance are different things. A conversation is something you participate in, not an exam you have to pass. If you've ever replayed a conversation while trying to fall asleep, you are definitely not alone. If something here feels familiar, you can leave a simple comment saying, "I do this." And if you enjoy psychology that helps you understand your own mind without judging it, consider liking the video and subscribing. You can also share this with someone whose brain turns 5-minute conversations into 2-hour investigations. Now, number 4 explains why negative moments can become especially difficult to forget. Number 4, your brain gives extra weight to social threats. Think about 10 things someone said to you today. 9 were completely normal. 1 sounded slightly critical. Which one will your brain remember tonight? Probably the critical one. Psychology has long studied what is often called the negativity bias, our tendency to give negative information greater psychological weight than equally positive or neutral information in many situations. From an adaptive perspective, this makes some sense. Missing something pleasant is unfortunate. Missing a potential threat can be costly. But in modern social life, that threat detection system can become overly active. Imagine giving a presentation at work. Afterward, people tell you, "Great job." One person says, "That second section was a little confusing." You go home. Which sentence follows you? "That second section was a little confusing." Suddenly your mind begins reconstructing the entire presentation around that one comment. Maybe the whole thing was bad. Maybe everyone else was just being polite. Maybe you embarrassed yourself. Notice what happened. One negative signal became more psychologically powerful than several positive signals. This doesn't mean criticism should be ignored. Useful feedback matters. But your brain's emotional weighting system isn't always an objective judge. Sometimes it treats discomfort as evidence. And that distinction matters. Something feeling important does not automatically mean it is important. Number 5. Replaying the conversation feels like problem solving. This is one of the biggest traps. Overthinking often feels productive. You tell yourself, "If I understand exactly what went wrong, I won't make the same mistake again." That sounds reasonable. And sometimes reflection genuinely is useful. But psychology distinguishes productive reflection from repetitive negative thinking, often discussed in research on rumination. Rumination involves repeatedly returning to distressing thoughts without necessarily moving toward a useful solution. Think about the difference. Reflection says, "I interrupted her twice. Next time I'll slow down and listen more." That's useful. You identified something specific. You learned something. You can act differently. Rumination says, "Why did I interrupt her? Maybe she thinks I'm selfish. Maybe everyone thinks I'm selfish. Why am I always like this? Maybe I ruined the friendship." Now the thinking is no longer producing new information. It's circling. Imagine accidentally making a joke that doesn't land. Healthy reflection might take 30 seconds. "That joke was awkward. I'll move on." Rumination can turn that tiny moment into an entire theory about your personality. The brain believes it is solving the problem because it is still thinking about the problem. But thinking and solving are not identical. A useful question is this thought giving me new information or just repeating the same fear? If nothing new is being learned, the analysis may already be finished. Reflection gives you a lesson. Rumination gives you another lap. Number 6. You may be trying to control how other people see you. At the deepest level, conversational overthinking often contains an impossible wish. If I analyze this enough, maybe I can make sure nobody misunderstands me. But you can't. You can communicate carefully. You can apologize when necessary. You can clarify your intentions. You can become a better listener. But you cannot completely control another person's interpretation of you. This connects with a broader psychological idea called impression management, the ways people attempt to influence how others perceive them. Some degree of impression management is completely normal. We naturally behave differently in a job interview than we do with an old friend. The problem begins when your sense of safety depends on perfectly managing everyone else's perception. Imagine sending someone a message. "Hope you're doing okay." They reply, "Thanks." That's it. Your brain immediately starts, "Why only thanks? Did I annoy them? Should I send another message? Maybe my message sounded strange." So you type another message. Delete it. Rewrite it. Delete it again. Eventually you realize something uncomfortable. There is no perfect sentence that guarantees the response you want. Because communication involves two minds, not one. You control your words. You do not control every interpretation of those words. And learning to tolerate that gap is a major part of emotional maturity. Peace begins where the need to control every interpretation ends. So how do you stop overthinking every conversation? Probably not by ordering yourself to stop thinking. That usually doesn't work very well. Instead, learn to recognize the moment when useful reflection becomes mental repetition. After a conversation, ask yourself 3 questions. Did I actually do something that needs correcting? Is there something useful I can learn? Is there any action I need to take? Maybe you realize, yes, I was unnecessarily harsh. Then apologize. Maybe you realize, yes, I dominated the conversation. Then practice asking more questions next time. But sometimes the answers will be no, no, and no. At that point, the remaining discomfort may simply be uncertainty. And uncertainty doesn't always need to be solved. Sometimes it needs to be tolerated. You can even tell yourself, maybe they misunderstood me. Maybe they didn't. Maybe that moment was awkward. That's okay. I don't need to know exactly what they thought. That isn't giving up. It's recognizing the boundary between what belongs to you and what belongs to someone else's mind. And here's the deeper insight. If you overthink conversations, it may be tempting to see your sensitivity as a flaw. But the same mind that notices subtle changes in tone may also be attentive. The same person who worries about hurting others may care deeply about how people feel. The same self-awareness that becomes exhausting when uncontrolled can become emotional intelligence when directed well. The goal isn't to become someone who never reflects. It's to become someone who knows when reflection has done its job. Take responsibility for what is actually yours. Learn from genuine mistakes. Repair relationships when repair is needed. But don't spend hours defending yourself in imaginary trials that nobody else is attending. You are allowed to have imperfect conversations. You are allowed to pause awkwardly. You are allowed to say something differently than you intended. You are allowed to be misunderstood occasionally. And you are allowed to leave a conversation without carrying it home with you. Because emotional intelligence isn't knowing exactly what everyone thinks about you. Sometimes, it's knowing that you don't need to. If this video helped you understand your mind a little better, subscribe for more psychology and self-understanding content. And the next time your brain tries to replay one sentence for the 20th time, remember, you don't have to solve every conversation after it ends.